Robinson. It's my pleasure to have with us tonight Mr. Harry Gross. Harry is the Chief of Research at the Neurosurgical Institute of Georgia. And along with many attributes he has, I would have to say it's fair to say that Harry supports the Democratic Party. And it's useful to get that kind of opinion. Myself, I would say I'm sort of a Bush Republican. That's fair. It's hard to categorize people, but that's not a bad demarcation for me. But I thought Harry is right in the middle of the political struggle that the country is facing now. And so tonight, I think it's fair to discuss what some of the things President Trump is doing, just to have a discussion about that. And one of the issues is that the way the country works is we have all kinds of checks and balances, and we have freedom of speech. So we're here in Macon, Georgia. We can exercise our opinions up or down, and that's a great privilege of being American, and we don't want that to ever go away. And it's complicated, but that's a thing to say. And maybe we could start the conversation, Harry, and I know we've had sort of a peripheral conversation about this, but the people in the White House press corps, there's an effort to limit who has access to this particular source of news. And the idea being that the people that have traditionally been there, from the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal or the Christian Science Monitor or maybe the legacy TV networks, they have a particular viewpoint that doesn't match the ideas the country has. On that, we might say that. And so they've attempted to do that. And maybe we could just, instead of putting people that they say represent maybe their podcast or this or that, or people in provincial places. So that's what they've attempted to do, as I understand it. And maybe you could discuss that a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yes, so as of, I believe it was last Tuesday, so a week ago now, the White House announced that the White House Correspondents Association, which has been the independent press attaché to the White House since the Wilson presidency, I believe, would no longer be allowed to determine who is going to cover the president, who's going to be allowed in the White House press briefings, invited to Oval Office events, that sort of stuff. That instead the White House would be making that decision. That is breaking with 80 years of precedent, 80 plus years of precedent on that side. We've had the Associated Press, AP, effectively barred from White House events and covering the White House due to their refusal to call the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America. And
that's all, I think they said, well, I'll do it in some ways, but not universally. Or maybe
I don't think they're doing it at all, but because they're international press.
I think internationally they want to keep stick with the well-known description of the area. Most people, including myself, think of it as the Gulf of Mexico, the Gulf. You can call it the Gulf. But okay, well, all right, just continue.
Well, regardless, it's continuing a worrying trend of what I would describe as a push towards censorship, and certainly what would be, I think, fairly characterized as a clear effort to shape the information environment in favor of the White House. There has always been a love-hate relationship between the White House and the press. No one likes to be criticized publicly. No one certainly likes to be criticized on the front page of a major newspaper, or on the primetime news. And the step that the White House is taking now is the first step in a very long history of the White House press corps to really control that environment of some sort. There have been cases where White House reporters had their press credentials revoked. There's been a couple of Supreme Court cases about that, over what constitutes a violation of freedom of speech and that kind of thing. This is brand new. This is untrodden territory.
Well, just to go discussing this a little bit. So there are a lot of ways one can take this issue. So to start with, you mentioned legal cases. It would appear to me, neutral, well, I don't understand the complexities of all of this, but okay, I'm going to decide who comes in to talk to me or who's going to interview me. And I think that would be a fairly ubiquitous arrangement. So if for better or worse, politicians, if someone, a hostile person wishes to interview them, they can just say no, and they generally do that. And the artifice by which the government influences everyone, it's really quite a 1984 kind of arrangement. They really are in both parties. They're very cautious about what they do or don't do. And so this is a step in that direction. The question I will ask is it legal to do that? Can it just from facial, you would say you can't be a reporter cannot say I demand an interview on television. If they can't do that, the other person has it, and no one is suggesting that. So, firstly, is this legal? And then, what are the advantages that presumably the president would harvest with this arrangement?
Is it legal or not? I think it's kind of a murky gray area. I am not a lawyer, so let me clarify that here. But I think that it probably is legal to some degree. Cheryl V. Knight in 1977 said that you couldn't revoke press credentials without having a clear due process. That may be the line that has been crossed, as there may not have been a clear delineation of what that process is before they start chucking people out and denying access. If they do that, that's probably legal. It is totally fair to say, I don't want to give you an interview. That's not, you have a First Amendment right to freedom of speech. You don't have a First Amendment right to getting to talk all the time.
Yes.
So the legality of this is going to be kind of murky. It's one of those things where it may not be illegal, but it's certainly not good in that case.
That's right. And the president is the issue. So we have to be, at least, I think it's reasonable to be cautious about information control. Since certainly the Biden administration, the idea is, well, this is incorrect, or people would say the speech is being censored, we can't say this, we can't say that. And indeed, a question might be with the Biden administration, it's true enough, everyone can get in the room there, but to presumably talk to him or ask him questions. But I think generally the story was that he had just pre-selected people and he would take questions from pre-selected people, and he rarely did it. Where I think the point came across, which pretty well, was when the chaos of people in the White House press corps would question Biden's press person, several of them ladies. They would question him and rigorously question him and say this, what about that, and it was relatively free access, which I think was a useful arrangement. I'd say that's good to have that access. I've said this before. I really like Prime Minister's question time in the UK, and I know you're familiar with that. Would you like to say what that is?
Just the idea, mainly in the sense that, well, the Prime Minister is also responsible to his constituents and responsible to the larger Houses of Parliament, and so is open to being questioned by the Houses of Parliament, and has to own up to the music, whatever he's doing, good or bad.
And so I think it's really, if anyone's had occasion to watch the Prime Minister's question time, it's a wonderful thing to see, in my opinion. So the other side is there, the Speaker of the House of Commons, who is put there as a sort of a person of great neutrality and awareness and judicial temperament, and he has the trust of the House, so to speak, and he picks who asks questions. And presumably the people that plan to ask questions have sent the questions in to the Prime Minister. So it's a pretty grueling thing to see. So the story will be the Speaker will say, I call on whatever Representative Smith, and he may be the head of the competing party, will stand up and I demand that the Prime Minister explain, and so these are always loaded rhetorical questions, how it is possible that 1 million pounds was squandered on chipmunk preservation or something like that. Is there a better use of the money for chipmunks? Something like that. And then they go back and forth. And so the country, the great thing about this is, I think the idea is that there's everybody is being held account by the Democratic representatives. Everybody is there watching. You're going to do this. We're watching you like a hawk. We've got our eyes on you. The country has their eyes on you. So if you do something that's really egregious, we're going to call you to task right here, and we're going to keep at it. And so we're going to make sure you don't go too far off appropriate behavior. I think that's great. And so presumably the White House press corps could do something like that. Though in truth, I'm not sure how often that has occurred in the past. I mean, because there's the idea of that freedom of interchange, I think, is fairly restricted in the country, in the U.S., and that the people that ask these questions, many of them are picked, and then the idea is particularly, I think, the country's slowness with President Biden, that he rarely had interchanges, and so it was a very restricted kind of thing, and whatever he was up to, we could say this, was often, he didn't talk about it much. Now, the country with Trump, there's no shortage. In fact, it's an extraordinary fire hose of events taking place. The country is sort of on the back foot. So much is taking place. This is happening, that's happening. He's really not holding anything back. And he talks a lot, and I think, I don't know how much he's only asking for positive questions. I don't know. That would be a question to ask. If someone is looking into this, you could say that maybe the country's model should be something like the Prime Minister's question time. And then how is that working out? Both parties would presumably want to put their spin on things out there. And can you comment on that?
I would love to see President Trump stand after his speech to Congress tonight and take questions from both sides of the aisle. I think that would be both informative and entertaining at the highest level. I don't think that the political incentives in this country are going to favor that. I think, one, this is not a political culture that rewards being quick on your feet mentally. British parliamentary debates are some of the most entertaining things to watch, with great banter and wit, and that's rewarded politically. We don't reward banter and wit very well in this political system. I think it's a shame, but we tend to reward people who are very quiet, and when they do speak, they tend to just have it on their own terms, not just like question and answer. The few real debates we seem to have on the floor, they become great television.
I can't remember when we've had a really good debate. And there's a lot to debate now because the nation's policy is undergoing substantial changes. And that's fair to say, is this good, is that bad? And then one of the issues would be the checks and balances the country has, just to segue slightly into this. A lot of the things that President Trump is doing, the question is he exceeded his power in to do this? And there are many issues about that. And presumably the courts have the responsibility to keep Congress and keep the president in check, so to speak. So the country doesn't, in my opinion, it does better American exceptionalism. Our situation was it's not a parliamentary kind of democracy. You can't just push things quickly one way or the other. And although, and I'll ask you this question, it looks like so much of American policy is determined in a subrose fashion by bureaucrats, people who are rule makers. That's where people say, well, there might be some general thing that's out there, but this is what we're going to do about it. And different kinds of rules or different different policies are happening without any extraordinary purview. The bureaucracy is doing these things. And so, is this sort of what's going on here? The bureaucracy has done things, and you could say good things, whatever you want to say about it. And some of them are anathemas to certain parts of the population. So going through and discovering what these things are, is that a reason to sort of extend the power of the presidency to change this? Your comments on that?
I mean, one, I think calling it, a bunch of rulemakers and bureaucrats is unfair at best. These are civil servants. And while there are some who are probably not the greatest at their jobs, there are many. There are millions who are hardworking, who love this country, who are public servants, who've dedicated their life to public service, who've taken less pay than they could have made in the private sector to work for the betterment of this country. And they're experts in their fields. Most of these people are PhDs, masters. They're some of the best educated people in this country. As for the rulemaking process, the way these things go, most things tend to have a public review period. No one's just interested enough to ask or to get involved with that.
Well, I think I think on that subject, one of the things that's happening is that's been changed by the Trump administration. If I can get that straight, so much is happening, but so there's no I think in the past public purview of different kinds of rules was there in the past, but it was not obligatory. And my understanding is at least some parts of the Republican arrangements that they're going away with that. And I think that maybe, if I can get this straight, I think it's healthcare. I think the healthcare people said we're going to put these regulations in without public purview. I think so. And I think that's that's an issue that might be going on. And so the shoe fits on both sides of the foot. So the question is, what kind of regulations, what kind of things are being propagated? And so now we could say a lot of the objections to some of Trump's policies, President Trump's policies, are that no one understands what they're doing. This is all being done in a mysterious way. Is it good or is it bad? And that matches the complaints that traditionally Republicans have about the way the Democrats structured their bureaucracy.
Well, I would
more extreme.
The civil service has always been fairly publicly transparent, with the exception of classified information, usually in the national security sector. There has always been ways, particularly through FOIA requests, to get information on what's going on. Most people just didn't care enough to learn that.
Of course.
Now there's this idea of, we've been hiding it from you, and look at what they've hid. No one hid anything. No one just cared enough to ask. In terms of what's going on here, too, is it's not like this is some secret cabal that's putting together a bunch of rules, and they all have some secret agenda. These are experts who've been given a job to do, and they take the directives from elected officials and from them political appointees. When Congress passes a law, they typically don't specify every bit of minutia of something. They can't, because not everyone's expert. They hand that off to the executive branch, to the civil service, to basically say, hey, here's what we want you to do. You guys figure out how to do it. That seems to be how it goes. And that's because not everyone is an expert. I don't want, a geologist telling you how to do neurosurgery, right? At the same time, I don't want you telling a geologist how to do geology, right? We all have specified interests, and so we have created over the decades a specialized, highly dedicated federal workforce whose job it is to take directives from the people, that is in the sense of the elected mandate of Congress and the president and the like, and then turn that into actionable policy. And policies change over the course of time. We've got offices on offices of people to make sure that corruption is tamped down on, that things are legal. You can't sign off on anything until it's gone through 3 council's offices most of the time. There are lots of checks within that. What has gone on now is that through the likes of DOJ and through general, what I would say is as Republican contempt for federal government, there has been just a literal ripping of decades of policy and organization and institutions that will take decades to rebuild. And it's not, there is always argument for trimming things down. There's always a good argument for review. There's always a good argument to say, hey, let's take stock of what we got, particularly at the start of a new administration. That's not a bad thing. That's a really good thing. But what's being done right now is not taking stock. It's just tearing down the walls.
Right. So, yes, and just to speak to that point. So, I've been in a position in the board, and I've seen the way that the board just makes decisions and does things pretty much without much check. And so one of the things that it's true enough that sometimes these things are exposed, or you can have public comment about it sometimes, but it's appropriately mentioned that there's really not too much of a check in regards to things that happen. And if someone suggested, I don't know, we're going to forbid motorcycles to drive after 6 o'clock at night, or some regulation appeared like that, it was put out for public comment, there might be a vigorous objection to that, but that wouldn't, as I understand it, wouldn't be an easy way to change the regulation.
You can call your congressman.
That's right.
There are plenty of easy ways to put pressure on it.
The word is easy. So it would depend, and they're just a chaos. If you look at the number of regulations that are out there, there are some incredible number of regulations that are propagated. It's almost like if sort of the Russian playwrights that talk about when you're guilty of something, Dostoevsky, whatever, we have you. You're just going to have to confess to something. I don't know what I confess everything I possibly can think of. But there's some regulation, there's something that people are just violating because just walking around, there's so many millions of them. And this is part of the complexity of social control. So we have 350 million people here, all kinds of diverse backgrounds, opinions, different ways they want to live. Everything is tossed in here. How are you going to sort of arrange for these 350 million people to get along? And it's extremely difficult to do that. And so a clumsy way to do it is to use a bureaucratic fiat. And actually that seems to be what's out there. It's clumsy because there's nothing better, probably, about making sure that you go 80 miles an hour, 50 miles an hour, or you pay your taxes on whatever day you pay them, or these rules and regulations are put there, and they just are so extensive to kind of keep the house in order. And they have, I think they cause all kinds of inefficiencies. They do. There are lots of inefficiencies that the government causes. And if you're a private enterprise, could do much better. But I think it's fair to say the responsibility of the government is different than a private company. Actually, I would say efficiency, it's good to have it, but that's probably not the number one objective. I think you'd have to say this is a regime under which people can live without killing each other, and things are clumsy. Well, a new regulation came in to do this or that, and how the balance happens, I think, is something to think about. And the Republicans may say, well, I think they would. They'd say things are out of balance. Not all Republicans, but I'll say the Trump supporters, they would, hardcore supporters, they'd say, well, this has just gotten way out of hand. The bureaucrats are doing this, they're doing that, they're doing this, they're doing that. And the interest of the bureaucrats, I've been persuaded, is not my interest, which is, you could say that's a problem. I mean, if in fact the government, a lot of people in government think the government is opposed to their happiness, that's a big difficulty. And I don't know if you mentioned how decades of arrangements are being shredded by these efforts underway. Could it be therapeutic if you just go through this and people feel reassured after this process is finished? Well, okay, at least everybody knows everything, and the question would be what really happened, which is we don't know what really has happened because the courts are involved. And then the other point I think is fair is the whole country is watching what's going on here. There's no mystery about it. So everybody in the country is rapidly being engaged by these policy changes. And the way the country works is that if these policy changes are too extreme, the democratic process will rein it in, as will the courts. I mean, that would be my thought about that. You have less optimism.
Much less optimism. I mean, one, the Trump administration has clearly adopted the Jacksonian philosophy of Mr. Marshall has made his decision, now let it enforce it.
Yes.
Constitutionally, the courts can tell you what you're doing is wrong. Constitutionally, the courts cannot enforce that decision. They are trusting in your decency as a human being in order to obey their rulings. This man has no decency. He is not going to obey these rulings if they don't favor him. Then he's going to stack the judiciary in favor of people who will just tell him, yes, sir, you're doing a great job, sir, as he stamps on their neck. In terms of Congress is too paralyzed. And Congress is running terrified, to the Republican Party. As of now, the Republican Party has instructed its members to not do a single town hall anymore in this country because they're terrified of public opposition. Because these policies are deeply unpopular. They're hurting real people. And those people don't think about what the government is in their life. The government, in what seems to be what you're saying, seems to be this faceless void of these nameless bureaucrats. The government is the postal worker who delivers your mail. It's the fireman who's making sure your house doesn't burn down. It's the weather service guy in a plane flying through a hurricane so that the weather service guy on your TV can tell you when you need to evacuate or not. It's the scientists making sure that we don't have a volcanic eruption in Hawaii that kills thousands of people. It is people who make sure that your meat is safe, that your eggs are okay, that your birds don't have bird flu. It is people who are doing quiet work every day to make sure that we go about our lives safely, healthily, and as happily as we can, because government works best when we don't know it's there at all.
Well, certainly, I think it's not arguable that the government does all kinds of meritorious things. No question about it. No one would object to that. I think the complexities of the 350 million people as to what makes them tranquil and living their lives. Well, for whatever reason, a substantial number of people believe there's government excess is there, and they think that. And for rightly or wrongly, that's the case. And then defining what people believe the excess is another point. Now, one of the things going on now is the extraordinary changes that are being instituted. Really extraordinary. I mean, this is a real cultural, we talked about this slide before. It's like a revolution, a rightist revolution. This is happening, that's happening, new things are occurring. And the traditional way to ship sails, the course has been altered substantially. And people are going to pass judgment. Is that good or bad to have done that? And the courts are, I think, there. I don't believe they're routinely intimidated. They may have viewpoints that maybe even support some of those, but I don't believe, it's my understanding, people I've dealt with that are judges, I don't think they're intimidated. There are many reasons to think their position is secure, and our Constitution has made it that way. So I don't believe Trump is going to try to arrest someone. If he did, I mean, he's being watched like a hawk. We're watching him here in Macon, Georgia, about these changes. Everybody is doing that, and many people would say that's a good change, that's a bad change. Now, finally, my comment, and it was a lot of time to go here, but I'll make this comment. You mentioned actually about the town hall meetings. The Republicans saying don't go to town hall meetings or whatever. And I think this just goes along with the sort of gotcha way that politics happens. So if you're a politician, you just can't be a normal human. You just say, I think it'd be good to go to the town hall. I'll express my constituents, I'll express myself or whatever. But there's sort of a gotcha thing. And so people would be there with a TV camera and someone would ask you a hypothetical, rhetorical question. And how well you answer it, they just put it down, and then it would go into the hopper of the sophistry that both parties practice. And it brings up the question, if the sophistry is powerful enough, could you change the whole discussion? sort of the way the Nazis did, if you want to say that, or the communists, pick whatever group you want to pick, where their view is, I want to get my point across, and I use all my tricks to do it. I'll get pictures of people, or whatever it is. I'll put a monkey's face on a politician and I'll assert it, and I'll make jokes about it, or whatever. There are many, many tricks that are out there that stop rational discussion, which is the mother's milk of democracy. If we can't diminish sophistry and have rational discussions, then the democratic ideal is in trouble. Last word for you.
I think the democratic ideal has always been in trouble. We've always been yelling at each other in the public square, right? If you can bear to hear the words you've spoken, twisted to make a trap for fools, then you'll be a man, my son, right? Kipling knew this a century ago for all his flaws, right? The strength of democracy. The white man's bird comes with a lot of baggage. And the strength of democracy and what we have to be looking for here is, I hope I'm wrong. I hope that I am wrong about this president. I hope I'm wrong about this administration, because I want this country to succeed. I love this country deeply. I am at my core a nationalist in the sense that I want the United States to be the greatest place on the planet Earth in the history of this planet. But if we do not have a free press, if we do not have an administration that respects the traditions and institutions of this country, and that doesn't seek to do things in a balanced and well thought out way, we are going to throw away a century of American dominance and power for one man's ego.
Okay, that's all well said, Harry. I will end by saying, defending Kipling, if the recessional, if you read that, there's a lot of wisdom that Kipling was a creature of his time. I'll let it go. We probably shouldn't debate Kipling, but
we can debate Kipling another night. I will happily debate Kipling.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.